Basically, all of our projects are designed to fight the causes and or the effects of sea level rise and climate change. So anytime you plant any tree, it's capturing carbon, which fights climate change and therefore sea level rise. But what's more important is to prepare the ground so that we will have a safer community as sea level comes up. So we have planted around 8,000 mangroves so far, and those, many of which are now 15 feet tall, are fighting climate change on multiple levels. So one is, of course, like any tree, they capture carbon. What a lot of people don't realize is that they capture roughly 1.5 times the carbon that a comparable tropical tree would of the same size. So they're much more effective. Next is they actually protect our coastlines during hurricanes. So all the wave action that would damage our coastlines is filtered through those mangrove roots, which is essential to inland infrastructure like where we are right here and beyond. Next is, of course, those mangroves provide an estuary for seafood and game fish, and that drives our economy and it feeds people. But what's also important to understand is that because it's natural systems that are capturing carbon, unlike unnatural systems that create carbon, we're fighting climate change as part of our food supply system as well.
It's been 1.5 years I've been with Urban Paradise Guilds. For a year I did an internship with them, working in the nursery and in the fields, planting and doing habitat restoration. And then he ended up hiring me once he got grant money, and it's been half a year since I've been working with him. Alright, so when we work on mangroves here at the nursery, they've all came from a project site where we rescued them. During Hurricane Irma, all the propagules got washed too high up onto land and they were pretty much just going to dry out and die. So we went in there with actually an all-girls school, Carrollton High School, and we went in there and rescued tons of mangroves and pretty much brought them back here to the nursery, and we worked on transplanting them into 1-gallon pots, and now they're growing and growing, and hopefully soon we could get them planted into our project site over at Ace Preserve or other places that they need it.
So there's many different threats to our mangrove ecosystems here in South Florida, one of them being invasive species. So there's a lot of species such as Australian pine, Brazilian pepper that actually invade these ecosystems and can prevent those mangroves from really having a healthy mangrove environment. It's also threats such as pollution, so everything from plastic pollution that can really smother out the mangrove roots, as well as nutrient pollution in the waterways, and things like coastal development. Because these ecosystems are right at the fringes of our waterways, it's very valuable real estate. So we have a lot of, they're under threat from developers that are building different structures along the waterways to shore up these waterways, or shore up these coastlines and shorelines in order to build condos and homes and whatnot.
So Australian pines attack native habitat in multiple ways, but one of the scariest ones is they use a form of chemical warfare. The technical term, it's allelopathic. Essentially, this stuff here that looks like human spit is sap that is dripped on the ground, and it actually kills all the native plants that it's in contact with, especially young ones. So when you look on the ground below Australian pines, you'll see that there's almost nothing alive there. And that's because as the sap drips and as the leaves decompose, they release that same chemical warfare agent. Now, they don't have to kill the adult trees. All they have to do is kill all the babies. And eventually, by killing reproduction, they win. So in the case of the Australian pines, we have a number of different methods. One is weed wrenching. We use a tool that's designed for tearing saplings out of the ground, and we do that. And in fact, many of these piles here are made up of Australian pines that we literally tore out of the ground. And that's a human-powered machine, basically, that really kicks butt. We can't remove them all. The bigger trees are harder to terminate that way, or impossible. So we've developed a method that we call banana peeling. And what we do is we cut the tree down as low to the ground as possible. If we simply left it there, it would have roughly a 50% termination rate. What we do is we use something like either a pocket knife or a screwdriver, and if you were looking at the side of, from a side view of the trunk, peeling the bark outwards like this to form something that looks similar to a funnel. We peel that bark, which is flexible on saplings like this, down as close to the ground as possible. And then we take rotten wood from Australian pines, which is loaded with microorganisms that are self-selected to eat Australian pines. And we sprinkle that rotten wood down at the bottom of the V, where the V will keep them wet by functioning as a water collector during rain and heavy dew events. And so this is essentially creating a huge wound on the trunk of the tree. The whole trunk becomes a wound, an infection at the point where it meets the ground, and ultimately we have a 100% success rate with terminating them if it's done properly. There are other methods available as well.